This week exists to punish my hubris. When I started covering this war, it was simple. One battle and it's over. Turn out, no, you have 3 more years to cover, bucko. From randomly engaged in a death struggle north of Richmond, General Butler ready to face off against Beauregard for the Confederate capital, General Sheridan prepared to gallop across the Shenandoah Valley, General Sherman ready to march to Atlanta over the corpse of Johnston. I hope one day I'll be forgiven for whatever I did to deserve this. Let us return to the wilderness. 0100 hours, the 6th. True to his word, General James Longstreet commences his march to General Robert.E. Lee's army. He is still behind schedule, the roads are terrible, and keeping a consistent direction in the dark is hard. When light breaks, Longstreet is nowhere to be seen, and Ambrose P. Hill's corps is alone, vulnerable, and facing down the 2nd Corps under General Hancock. 0500 hours, the Union battle line begins to march towards the 8 gray brigades that oppose them, with artillery behind them. Useless since the forest hides the enemy. They advance. Then a shout. Longstreet has arrived. The rebels are saved. Where is his corps? The general has no divisions, brigades, or even regiments with him, breaking the spirit of the 3rd Corps. Lee watches as the Confederate infantry runs for their lives, pursued by a stream of blue coats. Nothing can stop their advance. Well, they quit their advance. The lack of order among the Federal force caused lines to overlap, and they were forced to control themselves, to reform their formation. In true desperation, Hill orders Lieutenant Colonel William Pogue to open fire on the Union with his battery. Hill's men are in the line of fire. This will kill Graybacks. The barrage does slow the advance of the Union, but the flanks are still under incredible pressure. Lee and Hill ride, trying to rally their men, just to put up some semblance of resistance. My God, General McGowan, is this splendid brigade of yours running like a flock of geese? No, General, the men are not whipped. They just want a place to form, and they are ready to fight as well as ever. This is a lie. The entire situation is a mess for Hill. Major, what's the matter? Are these men being marched back? No, goddamn them! They are running. Just as the entire rebel position is about to fall, a column of butternut is spotted, and Longstreet's men have arrived. Lee inquires about one nearby brigade. Whose boys are you? Texas boys. I'm glad to see it. Texans always move them. Hurrah for Texas. Lee rides with them forward into battle. Texans under Brigadier General John Gregg realize the issue, try to get Lee to return to safety. We won't go on unless you go back. Finally, the old Virginian rides out of danger to Longstreet so the two friends might confer. As Lee rides back, Gregg and his men march forward to their deaths. Longstreet deploys his 2 divisions under Generals Joseph B. Kershaw and Charles W. Field, which perform excellently, wishing to avenge the loss of Hill. The first line falls under the fire of Federal guns, but the second line is able to force our boys back. Major General Field stops and tries to reorganize the men, but Brigadier General Kershaw continues the march, striking into the divisions of Mott and Birney. Getty was wounded standing with his brigade against the Gray onslaught, and despite the pressure, the Union line held. Gray was wounded standing with his brigade against the Gray onslaught, and despite the pressure, the Union line held. Kershaw personally leads the charge, but is held at bay. Getty is being reinforced. It is now a question of which side's reserves are better. General Richard Anderson, a division commander under Hill, who had been held back to defend the Rapidan, arrived on the field. After it became apparent, the Rapidan fell. He is given to Longstreet to act as the reserve. Likewise, the Union has been holding onto a division, this being one of Burnside's. Now Hancock is angry at Meade for holding onto these reserves, being incredibly cautious. But I don't understand how Meade has control here since Burnside is not technically under him. Lee has deferred command to Longstreet, who has stabilized the line. Hill's line. Ewell in the north is still at risk. Both sides have holes in their formation. When General Warren is told to attack the rebel 2nd Corps, he is apprehensive until he receives word that the 9th Corps would move into Chewning Farm and fill that gap. Another panicked commander is General John Sedgwick. He believes that Ewell is up to something, and as rebels burst through the trees, he is proven correct. But these secessionist scoundrels are easily repulsed. Uncle John decides to pursue them. This is a mistake, as the Confederate breastworks make the fields before them into a killing ground. When Warren hears about this, he realizes that his 5th Corps would be advancing over more open ground, and therefore calls off his advance. He needs to strike from the flanks. But how? Meade, under orders from Grant, tries to get the attack going, but is ignored. He tries again. He is ignored. But Sedgwick, receiving similar orders, follows them, attacking again and again. No breakthroughs, just losses. At this point, Meade gives up. Longstreet's arrival undoes Grant's plan. The entire engagement is just sniping and bombarding, and Burnside is fresh. He should be carrying the assault. Wait, where is he? Behind schedule, it seems. It isn't until 0730 hours that the final march begins to Tuning Farm. Before he can reach his destination, he comes under fire. Brigadier General Robert Potter takes the 2nd Division and strikes against Ramseur's brigade. The rebels reinforce, so does the 9th Corps, and the gaps on both sides are filled. The hope of the Union to break the flanks of Ewell is over. Grant tries to coordinate between his subordinates, but there are no good maps, and his chain of command is tangled. Meade tries to straighten his line, but it's strenuous movement under the hailstorm of bullets. At 0900 hours, Hancock receives word from General Sheridan that cavalry will strike Longstreet along Brock Road. This confirms the 2nd Corps commander's suspicion that he was at risk of being flanked. He pulls back and extends his flank, thinning his line to connect with Warren. The Union's turn is over. It's now Longstreet's time to play. It turns out Longstreet still needs time. The report of Sheridan was mistaken, but the cavalry does play a role. Brigadier General George Armstrong Custer and his Michigan Wolverines break apart rebel cavalry under Thomas Rosser, but are held at bay by artillery. When this report goes to Hancock, he believes that General George Pickett's division has arrived. I don't know why he thinks this. Now it's Longstreet's time. Wait, no, he still needs to find a good place of attack. This task is given to the Army's chief engineer, Major General Martin Smith. Born in New York, but married a Southern lady, is a fine engineer and trader. An effective one, as he finds a railroad cut. Unexploited. He goes on to find many other excellent geographical features to use. Low on manpower, but eager to take this advantage, Longstreet gives 3 brigades to Officer William Mahone to strike on the far Union right flank using hill and ridges. This sounds just like Little Round Top from Gettysburg. On the march, Mahone picks up a 4th brigade, on the yell by Lieutenant Colonel Moxley Sorrell. "Follow me, Virginians!" The Union men are taken by surprise, the rebels exploiting recruits as they rested and ate. Their flanks extremely pressed. Seemingly surrounded by secessionist fire, they are forced back. Mahone presses on. In the future, Hancock in conversation with Longstreet remembered it as, "You rolled me up like a wet blanket." And this sounds just like Chancellorsville, which given the location makes sense. But still, these battles are melting together. But to return to General Wadsworth, who has mixed match of different corps, barely holding on. He calls for the Iron Brigade, but this opens up his flanks. He then tries to charge his way through the hellfire of Confederate cannons and musketry, grabbing the 20th Massachusetts and leading them forward, to only be struck by a bullet in the brain. The whole Union line peeling back. A second Chancellorsville seems possible. With Hancock's command battered, this left Warren in the crosshairs. Longstreet marched with his officers ready to select their next spot. General Jenkins with his South Carolina troops brilliantly parade towards the Old War Horse, displaying their new dark gray uniforms. The 12th Virginia from Mahone's brigade sees this. It assumes them to be Union soldiers, opening fire. Jenkins and Longstreet rush forward, trying to get their men to stop firing. They are friends. It seems like another Chancellorsville, but we skip to the part where the rebels shoot themselves. The bullet goes through Kershaw's skull. Longstreet rides under the crossfire of his own men to help Kershaw when he is struck through the neck. Blood enters his mouth as he gives over command to Major General Field. Field now has to lead an assault on Warren, and Hancock has reformed on Brock's Road, and he doesn't have Longstreet, and he has to move through the dense forest that confused the Federal assault. While he does this, Major General Richard Anderson is riding towards him to take command as Lee wants someone he can trust to lead the 1st Corps. Hancock has been digging in, improving breastworks as more men flood in. Meade secures a single brigade from Warren to reinforce the 2nd Corps. But as artillery overlooks the beleaguered mosh of men, Hancock is able to cement his position by 1400 hours. Meade then turns his attention to General Sheridan, who he orders to defend the supply wagons and fords. It's time for defense. This angers Grant, but he realizes that the job of assault does belong to the 9th Corps. So where is Burnside? He is in his assault position, a mere 8 hours late. General Potter, you remember him? Charges against the rebels at 1400 hours, breaking them, but being repulsed when he advances against breastworks. The rebels counterattack, but Potter's reinforced, and the entire thing goes to stalemate. Thanks, Burnside, you were a real help. He ignores Meade and Hancock's yells and waits for Grant's, who asks for an assault at 1800 hours, after time is given for rest. Lee doesn't rest, instead turning to the 1st and 3rd Corps, asking for them to assault Hancock. They do so and are blasted apart by artillery and rifle fire. The line is impenetrable, they thought, until a fire broke out, forcing the main body of the impenetrable line to flee. The Confederates, seeing this, decide to run through the flames. Surprisingly, they make it, only to be blasted apart by canister shot. Double-loaded canister completely halts the rebel advance. Hancock reforms and restores the line, but he won't be able to attack as Grant had wished. Burnside can still fight, and therefore charges into the First Corps' flanks. He breaks them. The rebels are reinforced, they counter and charge, and Burnside falls back to entrenchments. So does Lee's army. Not that Lee wants this. He does still have one final piece on the board, John B. Gordon. Georgian-born, moved to Alabama, raised regiments when the time came, and now finds himself in the command of Georgians. Go figure. He has hope to strike the Union northern flank, but his superior, General Jubal Early, has no faith. Undaunted, Gordon goes to Ewell, who supports Early. Rebel reinforcements come, and again he asks. Still no! Finally, at 1730 he is given permission. His brigade, supported by a North Carolina brigade and a Virginian one, advance against the Union flanks. They come across New Yorkers, rifles stacked and dinner in hand. This is seriously just Chancellorsville again. The Northerners panic and flee. The rebels press them. General John Sedgwick rallies them just like Howard did. Nighttime ends the battle, as Union reinforcements beat back Gordon's assaults. Union camp. Meade and Grant are angry. Both seem to be stepping on the other's toes. Grant finally breaks when a staff officer warns him that Lee might try to cut off a line of retreat. General Grant, this is a crisis that cannot be looked upon too seriously. I know Lee's methods well from past experience. He will throw his whole army between us and the Rapidan, and cut us off completely from our communications. Oh, I am heartily tired of hearing about what Lee is going to do. Some of you always seem to think he's suddenly going to turn a double somersault and land in our rear, and on both of our flanks at the same time. Go back to your command. Go back to your command and try to think what we're going to do ourselves instead of what Lee is going to do. Battle ends. Both sides fall upon their cots exhausted. The rebels start to dig in, the crunch of dirt incessantly keeping many awake. The Union suffered 2,246 killed, 12,037 wounded, 3,283 captured or missing, over 17,000 total. Rebels lost 1,477 killed, 7,866 wounded, 1,690 captured or missing, over 11,000 total. What do both sides have to show for it? Nothing. When Grant wakes on the morning of the 7th, he reflects on the battle before him. It was just like Gettysburg, as the flanks were held under constant pressure from Lee's assaults. And Chancellorsville. Gordon fancied himself a new stone wall. Nothing to say about the tragedy of Longstreet. And Fredericksburg, as Burnside crashed headlong against entrenched rebel positions as units became mixed. And Antietam, where the battle line stretched and moments of supreme triumph were taken away under miscommunication. Like Second Bull Run, as he, a commander from the west, battered horns with eastern commanders in the face of rebel defense. And just like the 7 Days battles, as Lee and his subordinates constantly tried to defend Richmond by assaulting federal flanks. It's just like past battles. Grant needs to break these similarities. Before him is an entrenched opponent, baiting him to make the mistakes of previous commanders. But he decides to smash that chain. General, make all preparations during the day for a night march to take possession at Spotsylvania Courthouse. Grant won't let Lee direct the battle. He won't let his commanders ruin his plan. He is marching on. And the week isn't over. Damn, that would have been an excellent ending. Instead of going chronologically, the entire point of this series, let us follow Grant through the week and go back to the 6th at the end. May 7th is filled with calm silence, till nighttime, when the Union begins its advance towards Spotsylvania. Sheridan is sent out to screen this movement and is forced to skirmish with Major General Wade Hampton's division, Fitz-Hugh Lee's division. Grant is cheered as he is seen by the men, enthusiastic to continue the march. At least, some of them are. Others curse the general and are angered that they are allowed to rest after fighting for 48 hours. The men are shushed as to not alert the rebels. The Army of the Potomac jerks its way towards Spotsylvania, doing a terrible job of keeping secrecy. Lee gets reports of a movement towards Spotsylvania and the cavalry skirmish, but he also gets reports of the Union retreating. He orders General Anderson to take the 1st Corps and move to Spotsylvania, just in case. He wants this done by 0300 hours. It's done at 2300 hours. May 8th starts with hoofs hitting dirt. Sheridan's cavalry advancing down Brook and Fredericksburg Road, using their carbines to push Confederate cavalry under General JEB Stuart back continually. This is too slow for Cavalry Commander Merritt, who calls upon Warren and his 5th Corps to help. Surprisingly, the infantry is even slower than the cavalry, and it takes 2 hours for the Lee Division under General John C. Robinson to finish the clearing operation. General Wilson of the Federal Horsemen takes his division and strikes Fitz-Ogg-Lee, pushing him down the Fredericksburg Road. This causes Fitz-Ogg to send word to Major General Anderson for help. Despite being near the Corps command, Richard Anderson breaks from Lee's orders. He can't let the cavalry be destroyed, nor the intersection fall to the Bluebacks. He sends out Colonel Hennigan's South Carolinians and Mississippians in support with Major General John Haskell's Artillery Brigade. Fitz-Ogg-Lee isn't satisfied with this and demands 2 more brigades. He needs to take Spotsylvania, which is where Wilson's cavalry is. But turns out this is overkill, as General Sheridan orders Wilson to fall back. General Richard Anderson takes Spotsylvania and begins to dig in at Laurel Hill. He's waiting for General Ewell's 2nd Corps and the 5th Corps to attack. Governor K. Warren is waiting at the very base of Laurel Hill. He wants reinforcements from General Sedgwick and General Hancock to support him, but it's 0830 hours, and he needs the hill to take the crossroads, so he turns to Brigadier General Robinson. Robinson is a terrible choice, not because he is a lousy commander, he isn't, because he has only a brigade ready, exhausted by the march. Warren assures them that they are only facing cavalry. Intense volley of musketry proves otherwise. When the 2nd and 3rd Brigades arrive, Robinson leads another assault, personally charging at them, being wounded by a musket ball to the left leg. Also wounded is Colonel Dennison of the 3rd Brigade. The unit assault falls back under the force of Confederate reinforcements. Warren knows he must take the hill. He doesn't know the condition of his men, nor does he realize he is facing more than cavalry. He throws in a brigade from Griffin's division, then the Iron Brigade. Just after noon, Warren finally realizes he is facing the entire 1st Corps. He panics, rightly, and asks for reinforcements and resupply. General Robert.E.Lee sees the opportunity and orders Ewell to rush to Anderson for a potential counterattack. While Grant sees the exposed 5th Corps, he calls Sedgwick and Burnside to run towards Warren. Sedgwick's line is ready at 1700 hours. Ewell has already arrived and formed up. 1800 hours, another Federal assault. It's disjointed and the march of men is cut short, as are the infantry. Counterattack from the rebel Rhodes Division pushes our boys down the hill, but is repulsed as darkness takes hold. Union lost Spotsylvania, lost their opportunity, and lost 1,500 men. With Warren repulsed and Sheridan a complete failure, Lee has his precious time to form his line and dig in. General Meade also digs in opposite to Lee's line and goes to see Sheridan punished. Not only did he fall back, but now he wants to be given independent command. They both go before General Grant too. Well, we'll talk about that later. Shovels hit the ground, dirt flung. Meade continues to punish perceived failures, ordering Warren put under the command of Sedgwick. Sedgwick ignores this order, instead focusing on the constant sniping between the two sides. The unit is getting the worst of it, but Uncle John, in good humor, decides to bring up morale on the front line. Seeing his skirmishers dodging, he asks, "What? Men dodging this way for single bullets? What will you do when they open fire along the whole line?" "Why are you dodging like this? They couldn't hit an elephant at this distance." "Why are you dodging like this? They couldn't hit an elephant at this distance." A Whitworth rifle goes off as the secessionist sniper finds his target. Well, the same shrill whistle closing with a dull, heavy stroke interrupted me. I remember distinctly that I commenced to say, "General, they are firing explosive bullets," when his face turned slowly to me, and blood splurting from his left cheek under the eye in a steady stream brought to me the first knowledge of our great disaster. He fell in my direction. I was so close to him that my effort to support him failed. I went to the ground with him. General Grant is horrified, ensuring that there are 2 thorough inquiries into the event, but sadly, Sedgwick never regains consciousness. His loss is greater than the loss of a whole division of troops. Sedgwick is replaced in command by Brigadier General Horatio G. Wright. This confuses me, because Major General Birney is a Major General and above Wright, but I guess because he's in the 2nd Corps and not the 6th Corps, he isn't eligible? I don't know. This seems a bit ridiculous to me. By now, the 2 lines of trenches are about 7 miles. There seems to be only one weakness, a salient, the Mule Shoe. But this is still a strong position on high ground, so Grant doesn't want to assault it. But with daylight growing weaker, he feels a need to assault. When reports show that the rebels are striking against Burnside's corps on the right flank, he believes now is the time to attack the left flank. General Hancock is given the order to cross the Po River and advance on the left, and darkness forces the charge to be cut off at 20:00 hours. Grant agrees with the disengagement. This does cause stress for Lee, who rushes men from the 3rd Corps under Major General Jubal Early, took over from the 6th Lieutenant General Hill. 2 divisions are sent to the left, leaving only one, Major General Cadmus Wilcox, to face off against Burnside. May 10th, we turn again to Hancock. He becomes tangled with Mahone's division. General Barlow's Blue Division is left to personally deal with Mahone. The other 2 are sent to join with Warren and Wright for a grand assault. Grant is risking his flanks to hopefully push on a weak point. I mean, we must be weak somewhere, and surely Barlow can hold. He is a great commander, but he has to deal with Mahone and Heth's divisions. The barrel of muskets disoriented the infantry, and the smoke makes artillery ineffective. The bodies are piling up. Soon Birney's division reinforces, along for the continuous charge of Heth to be repulsed. But under the constant charges, our Federals are routed. The 2nd Corps even loses a cannon, but the woods catch fire, stopping the advance of the rebels. Seems like woods catching fire has become very common, actually. In the center, Meade urges Warren to hit Mule's Shoe, having Gibbon's division do it. Coer and Crawford support Gibbon. The Union begins its march forward. Even before they get to the rebels, they run into trouble as the terrain breaks apart coordination. Once they reach the opposing breastworks, they find the enemy behind sharpened roots and trees, facing them like Alexander the Great's phalanxes. General Ward gets reports that his men are pinned and being picked off, but he has to earn that reputation back. So he orders an assault at 1600 hours. A mad rush towards the Confederate parapets. It's cut down. The second line fares no better. General Rice of Coer's 3rd Brigade is mortally wounded. No holiday task. Crawford's division assaults General Gregg's Texans, and even with Gibbon's help, they are repulsed. Meade is busy seeing to false alarms. When he hears of his defeat, he orders another charge, aided by a single brigade, General Ward's. 1900 hours. The Union men, broke and tired, trudge forward, seeing rebels scavenging for ammo and weapons from their fallen comrades. When some Southern scouts saw the enemy, they called out, asking for the Yankees to come closer, so the walk wouldn't be as far. 2nd charge is repulsed. Ward with his fresh brigade does better, marching to point-blank range of G.T. Anderson's cannons before breaking. Though, one section of his command does quite well. The 3rd Maine and 86th New York comes across the command of Colonel Robert Taylor, sleeping and eating, believing the battle would be over. Our New Englanders charge in, catching the enemy off guard and engaging in melee. Bewildered, Colonel Taylor chooses the hot frying pan as his weapon, striking both friend and foe alike. But it isn't until canister shot is added that the New Yorkers fall back. The entire advance had cost the army 5,000 men, for nothing. General Wright believes that these deaths must be for something, though. He has found a path to the enemy's position, and once the way is cleaned of sharpshooters, he gathers 5,000 men from 12 regiments, hands them to Colonel Emory Upton, and orders the charge. Upton is a genius, and his plan is close to perfection. There's a fortress before him, but he knows what to do. 4 lines, 3 regiments wide, fixed bayonets. Only the first rank will have loaded muskets. No stopping and firing, just a charge. The bombardment sounds, and while the assault is pushed back an hour to 1800 hours, one of the classic infantry attacks of military history. The first rank emerges from the woods, shouts in unison, and begins to climb over the abatis. Bang! The 2 sides exchange fire. Then the second line comes in. They throw their muskets like spears. I was just as surprised as you were to hear this, and while their opponents dodge the thrown bayonets, the men begin to club their opponents and take prisoners. The Union is now in the fortress. Men then break from Upton's plan. It becomes Gershom Mott's job to keep the charge going. This is unenviable. He is from the 2nd Corps under the command of the 6th Corps, supposed to keep up contact with the 9th Corps. Second, his command is the smallest of all the divisions, and his men are upset. They are repulsed and Upton's command is on its own. Well, what about Burnside? His orders are vague and amount, just do your best. Burnside does try his best, but Grant orders him back as the assault he hoped for becomes just a digging operation, accepting personal blame for Burnside's failure. Upton is alone. Lee is prepared for a breach, and reinforcements are plugged into the gap. Upton's men do their best, but are pushed out, losing 1,000 men, but capturing 1,000 rebels. Colonel Emory becomes Brigadier General Emory. Grant wires Halleck asking for replacements and resupply. He wants another of Upton's assaults, this time bigger and better. The night hears the chopping of wood and the screams of the wounded. Both sides now call their trenches home. Grant believes Lee's army to be worn down, low on ammunition, and reaching its breaking point. Lee believes Grant's army to be exhausted, low on morale, and scared for their lives. Both sides seem pinned. So it looks like an excellent time to return to that loose end of Sheridan. Once again bogged down is the Union Army of the Potomac. The cavalry commander, Major General Philip Sheridan, is itching to use his equestrians to break the stalemate. General Meade does not wish to lose his scouts and screen, the traditional roles of equestrians, but Sheridan goes over his commander's head to his personal friend Ulysses S. Grant. I told him that I could whip Stuart if he would only let me. Let him start right out and do it. May 19th witnesses a fantastic display as the 10,000 Federal cavalry and the 30 cannons march out of camp. They do not hide their movements nor intentions. They are riding for Richmond. And if General JEB Stuart wants to stop them, then let him try. The 10th sees them raiding and recovering, bringing back 400 Union soldiers captured at the Wilderness. But this pillaging has given time for Stuart to bring his 4,500 troopers between Sheridan and Richmond. My men and horses are all tired, hungry, and jaded, but all right. Stuart deploys his 2 brigades in a Y formation. Wickham takes up his position on a ridge, perpendicular to Lomax's position on Telegraph Road. These Virginians wait till 1100 hours when Sheridan appears, about 3 times their size and armed with the 7-shot Spencer. Soon Lomax finds himself facing off against the brigades of Thomas E. Devon, Alfred Gibbs, and George Armstrong Custer. He is forced back to Wickham's Ridge, where Stuart is able to reform his line. The 2 sides break off fighting, a bit of rest. Preston Bragg sends word to Stuart that reinforcements are on the way. He just needs to hold. Thunder sounds. The battle starts again. Sheridan orders a general assault. Custer charges right at the center, and Stuart, fearing the worst, visits the front. He watches as the Baltimore artillery gets overrun. Quickly, he dashes to the 1st Virginia, his original command, leads them in a countercharge. He yells words of encouragement, having broken the Union assault. Private John A. Huff started as a sharpshooter under Berdan before joining the 5th Michigan Cavalry, a crack shot. He saw an opportunity and seized it. He pulls out his pistol, cocks it, takes aim of the Confederate cavalier before pulling the trigger. Zip! The bullet travels, striking Stuart in his side. Fitzhugh takes command from the wounded General Jebb, but Stuart continues to shout words of encouragement, exclaiming upon the sight of retreating rebels, "Go back! Go back! I'd rather die than be whipped." Despite his pleas, within the hour, his men fall back from the field, defeated, rain-soaked, and demoralized. They inflicted 625 casualties to their own 300, but it's a sad day for the rebellion. The 12th proves why Stuart is so important. At Meadows Bridge was Fitzhugh beaten by Sheridan. General James B. Gordon, another Confederate cavalry commander, is mortally wounded. With Gordon goes about another 400 rebels. Sheridan, starved, decides to resupply. Sheridan no longer feels confident attacking Richmond, instead riding around to Butler. Stuart saves the Confederacy, but it cost him his life. James Ewell Brown Stuart, once a proud member of the Confederate triumvirate of Longstreet and Stonewall, succumbs to his wounds on the 12th. He was the eyes of General Lee, the most remarkable cavalry officer of America. The night of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis visited the dying commander.
General, how do you feel?
Easy, but willing to die. If God and my country think I have fulfilled my destiny and done my duty, I am resigned. God's will be done. When General Lee hears the news, he weeps. He never brought me a false piece of information. Thus slips the rider of the rebellion into death. With no one fit to take over from him, the cavalry corps he once led is split between his commanders, Fitzhugh and Wade Hampton, both unworthy successors. Despite the momentous loss, the war continues. Grant uses the 11th to find a weak point in Lee's mule shoe. Meade is sent to size up the individual corps. Hancock is decided will deliver the main blow. Wright and Warren would hold down the enemy. Burnside must assault in conjunction. 2 aides are sent to Burnside to ensure the cautious commander understands the importance of a vigorous offensive in detail. Lee spends the 11th trying to strengthen his line. He pulls out Dole's brigade, the one broken by Upton, and replaces it with Colonel Monogram's. Heth's division is moved from the far left back to the far right to blunt Burnside. Lee also hopes for another line of trenches to be placed at the base of the salient, and he receives a message from President Davis.
Hoke's brigade left Petersburg this morning with other troops to effect, if possible, a junction with Ransom at Chester. I have been painfully anxious to send your troops to you, but unaccountable delays have occurred, and we have been sorely pressed by the enemy on the south side. We are now threatened by their cavalry on the Brook Turnpike and Westham Road. I go look after defense. We'll have supplies attended to at once, and as soon as possible send troops to you. May God have you in his holy keeping, and support your efforts for your country's cause.
The Union uses the night of the 11th to the 12th to prepare themselves. Hancock, using the darkness, decides to shield his units as the rain drowns out the sound of their steps. Artillery units take over their place in the trenches. On mud, the two sides sleep. When Lee gets a report, the surprise is broken. While Stuart never gave bad information, W.H.F. Rooney does, his own son, telling him the Union is falling back. Burnside is moving towards Fredericksburg. Therefore, Lee orders Ewell to prepare himself to attack the retreating Army of the Potomac, limbering up cannons and pulling them back to a road where they can move more quickly. But on the ground, commanders don't believe this retreat is happening and beg for their artillery back. Ewell tells them at 0200 hours on the 12th. They don't start moving until 0330 hours. The rebels try to rest. The officers can't because of their confused orders. The reserves in column to pursue a retreating army that doesn't exist. Seems like the stage has been set for the perfect battle. The 12th sees the stop of rain. The thick fog takes over. The men of Hancock are wet, covered in mud, and blind in the fog. They start their march only at 0430 hours as the sun begins to light their way. Pickets are pushed away. Half of Given's force is sent to guard the flanks. The parapets come into sight, and the rush begins. Forward obstructions are thrown to the side, but the rebels now know they're under attack, and musket fire begins. Major General Birney's division charges straight in. General Barlow moves to the side, trying to encircle the salient. The battle turns to bayonet as clubbing and stabbing takes over firing. The rebels, exhausted and starving, scatter. Edward Johnson's division has broken. Rebel artillery is captured and turned on the rebels, causing mass surrender. Same goes for Birney, who repulses the Stonewall Brigade. Half of the Mule Shoe is captured. The limited artillery now in the hands of the Union. Lee was facing ultimate defeat. 2,000 rebels march back as prisoners with 20 heavy guns. General Johnston and General Stuart are marching along with them. Because of his name, he is forced into a comedic circumstance. What's your name? General Stuart. What? JEB Stuart? No. George H. Stuart of the infantry. Things go even worse for him as he can't honorably hand over his sword as he is missing it. He's escorted under a corporal. When he's recognized by Hancock, who extends his hand, "Under the present circumstance, I must decline to take your hand. Under any other circumstance, General, I should not have offered it." Allegheny Johnson is allowed to ride on horseback to the rear, but Hancock forces Stuart to walk. To return to the salient, Hancock's regiments turn to a mob but continue forward. But by now the rebels have stiffened their defense. A North Carolinian regiment wheels forward and opens fire on the packed mob, where any shot is impossible to miss. John B. Gordon tries to tip the battle, reinforcing the front. Brigadier General Robert Johnston leads the charge forward, and his men march back without him. Next, Georgians are sent in, but they fall down before the mob, and many surrender. With the remaining men, Gordon forms a line, not wishing to charge anymore. It's at this moment where General Robert.E.Lee rides to the front. Gordon rides to him, explaining the situation. But afterwards, Lee continues riding. "General Lee, this is no place for you." Bullets whiz around the Virginian general. "Lee to the rear. We will drive them back, General." The men of Lee don't want him near the danger and try to push back his horse Traveler. Finally, a sergeant grabs the reins and turns the commander around. Keeping their promise to old Lee, the men of Gordon rise, fire a ragged volley, and charge in. Start to turn back the exhausted and confused Bluecoats. More rebel brigades start to be thrown in. Stephen Ramseur leads his men, but is wounded for his trouble. General Abner Perrin rides by his men across a bloody field. His blood adds to the soil as he is shot dead from his steed. Meade begs Hancock to keep the assault going, but the countercharge is too much, and instead the fighting goes for the tip of the salient, naming it the Bloody Angle. As the fight for the angle goes on, the rest of the Union Army does not rest. 0530 hours, Grant got news of the initial success, and the order goes for the 2nd and 3rd Divisions of the 6th Corps to join in and aid Hancock. Brigadier General Thomas Neal and Brigadier General James Ricketts personally led their men, as did General Wright. Brigades moved to support the flanks of the Bloody Angle, but the main corps runs into the Confederate reinforcements. Volleys are exchanged as the beloved Excelsior Brigade is thrown back. More rebels arrive and the Union is being pushed back. Confused Samuel McGowan leads his South Carolinians forward, but is killed for his trouble, and the command of his brigade is hit. The rebel counterattacks are thrown back. The two sides exchange fire for the rest of the day. With 2 out of his 3 divisions stuck, he sends out the 1st Division of Brigadier General Russell. Emory Upton leads the way, shouting, "Hold this ground." The crack of thunder this time is not a metaphor for gunfire, as overused as I am. As the heavens pour open, Upton, leading from the front, upsets some of his comrades, but he is able to hold his men under the shattering fire of the rebels. He tries to bring in artillery, but they are cut down. But reinforcements do reach the front, drawing them away from the mule show. The rebels also suffer, not being immune to volley fire. Colonel Edwards tries to fall back, but is ordered then forward. When an officer comes by, he pulls a pistol on them, exhausted with the charge-countercharge. The rear ranks load and pass forward muskets as trench runners try to keep up supply. Some rebels low on shot throw rails and fences. Others trust only in their bayonet. But this isn't to say gunfire ceased, as trees and grass are cut under the gunfire. Blood runs down the slopes, and bodies are stacked to make way. Any support must come from Burnside's 9th Corps or the 5th under Warren. Burnside sends forward his 2nd Division at 0400 hours, and soon the 1st Division was sent in. They face very little opposition, capturing abandoned entrenchments and some rebel stragglers. Though as they advance, they struggle to keep contact with Hancock. When eventually General Robert Potter's 1st Division makes contact with substantial resistance, they dig in. Grant tries to get Burnside to move on, ordering him at 0545, 0800, and 1030, but all fail. Burnside's still haunted by Fredericksburg, but he does allow for his 3rd Division under Brigadier General Orlando Wilcox to move to the 2nd Corps. He then changes his mind and sends it to support the 1st Division and smash the rebel flank at 1400 hours. At the same time, General Henry Heth and Cadmus Wilcox are sent to break Burnside's flank. The rebels take advantage of this confusion and jump the Union. They suppress the artillery but can't take it. When infantry is brought against the Confederates, the artillery is able to open up and send the Greys packing. Instead of following up, the men of Burnside dig in, as they always do. At 0600 hours, Warren is given the order to attack the western side of the salient. 0730 hours, Bee tries to get Warren to support Wright. Warren sends a brigade and gunners, but is unwilling to do much more. Grant applies pressure on Meade and forces him to apply an even greater pressure on Warren. Warren points out the position he is meant to attack is unsuitable. But Meade, under constant yelling from Grant, breaks and orders Warren to attack at 0915 regardless of position with everyone. No questions. He's the calming. He clarifies his position and signs a letter, "Your friend." But an order is an order, and Warren with trepidation follows Meade's will. Warren's force faces a terrifying opponent. The Iron Brigade charges forward and even supported with 2 other brigades. They're repulsed by mini balls and canister shot. At 1030, Warren gives up. Grant complains to his staff about Warren, and there are even talks of replacing him. Earlier, Grant had personally praised the man, but things have changed. Meade intervenes. Warren is under his command, and he stays. There is a general switch to the east as Warren's divisions are sent to support the 2nd and 6th Corps. Lee takes advantage of this and reorganizes his line also. The mule shoe is too exposed. It cost him 8,000 men. He also moves east. He is worried about holding the salient, but his subordinates have grown confident. Darkness closed the battle. The fighting at the Bloody Angle continues to the 13th. We know the Union has to fall back. Grant had started the day with a hope of breaking Lee, but now he is scared of being counterattacked. He blames Meade and his subordinates for the 9,000 losses, but I believe the main blame belongs to Burnside. Well, there we are at the end of Spotsylvania for this week. Now to travel back in time. On the 9th, before a large group of guests, President Lincoln proudly announces,
"Our commanders are following up their victories resolutely and successfully. I will volunteer to say that I am very glad at what has happened. There is a great deal to still be done."
The same day, Davis tries to calm anxiety, even if it is his own. Writing to the Spotsylvania embattled General Lee,
"Your dispatches have cheered us in the anxiety of a critical position.
Between the overland campaign of Grant and the Atlantic campaign of Sherman, which we have to squish in the middle. How about another campaign, the Bermuda Hundred Campaign, named after the landing site of the Army of the James under General Benjamin Butler. The 6th is a communication between President Davis and General Beauregard, the opponent of Butler.
I hope you will be able at Petersburg to direct operations both before and behind you, so as to meet necessities."
Both Richmond and Petersburg are targets of Butler, but this is all theoretical. Let's get to the reality of war. The first action is the movement on Port Walthall, merely a reconnaissance mission done by Brigadier General Charles Heckman's brigade. They come across a small force of 600 rebels. Under orders to not bring on a general engagement, Heckman skirmishes with his opponents. The next day, the Union advances in detail, and the reinforced 600 fall back to Swift Creek. The entire affair is 300 northern casualties to 200 southern. Well, that was a short battle. How about another one? The 9th sees a Confederate charge easily repulsed. By the way, please check out Chesterfield History Society, one of my primary sources. Their animations are treats. The sound mixing, not so much. But as is clearly shown by the following,
Haygood's brigade is ordered to attack with tragic results. Confederate artillery prevents a disaster. Graham's Army gunboats bombard Fort Clifton with no effect. Confederate gunners hit the Brewster with cannon shot and sink her.
they are good tellers of history. I wish I could let them do all my work, but alas, it's my turn. Chester Station in the north, rebel cavalry break the picket line, but are repulsed by a whole cavalry regiment. Drake's brigade is sent to reinforce overnight, and the rebels prepare themselves for battle on the 10th. When day breaks and the Unions see their opponent's size, more brigades are rushed to Chester, arrive just in the nick of time, saving the left flank. Rebel Barton's brigade is reformed and reinforced to attack once again, but is repulsed once again. The two sides fall back, with the Union returning to Bermuda 100, and the Confederates slinking to Drury's Bluff, the next site of battle. The Union begins their march towards it on the 12th, but won't be until the 13th until battle arrives. Union General George Crook commands the Army of West Virginia, focuses on the rebel prize, the Department of West Virginia, the Confederate one, under General Albert G. Jenkins. Jenkins set up his defense at Cloyd's Mountain. An imposing set of breastworks are dug, so imposing that when Crook arrives, he does not wish to assault them. He has 3 brigades under Colonel Horatio G. Sickles, no relation to our beloved Dan, Colonel Carby White, and Colonel Rutherford B. Hayes. Under Hayes' command is Major William McKinley. What a star-studded cast! White begins the assault with an artillery barrage to back him up. He is repulsed. Next is Sickles and Hayes. Crook joins in to lead the men, almost drowning along the way. Hayes' Ohioans lead the assault, forcing hand-to-hand combat. Others are pinned down, and where their muskets sparks light nearby trees, they are burned alive. Again, forest catching fire. 2 West Virginia regiments stem the tide of battle, charging and capturing a rebel battery. Inspired by the bravery, the Ohioans reform and charge again. They push back the rebels, mortally wounding and capturing Jenkins. The 2nd Command, McCausland, leads the rebel rout. The next day, McCausland is bested, but the real action of the 10th is at Cove Mountain. For you see, Crook's advance wasn't his own. It was to be made in conjunction with General William W. Averill, who finds himself in battle with rebel rider John Hunt Morgan. After pushing back a Confederate screen, the Federal cavalry rests, until one man spots the main secessionist force. They are being reinforced. Any charge is called off, and the Union prepares themselves for defense instead. We are Morgan's men and will give you hell. Bang! Canister shot. Where did the rebels get their heavy gun? Well, it's a ceremonial one from Wytheville. The canister shot made up of scraps of iron from the local blacksmith. The Union holds, but Averill sustains a wound. Unable to find his second, General Dufay, he turns over command to Colonel Powell, who falls back. Dress parade that continued without disorder and a heavy fire. The Union line holds, and any break in the line is quickly reinforced. To end the battle, Averill uses a bit of deception. Averill used an elaborate deception to save his command. First, he told a staff officer that they could hold Morgan's men until dark. Crook's force would arrive to reinforce them. This was said in front of a local woman from the pro-Confederate community, with the hope that the bogus information would get back to the Confederate leadership. Second, he had an officer notify him that Crook arrived. Third, he ordered his men to give 3 cheers for General Crook. Either this saved him or the darkness. The two sides break off. Casualties are hard to know for this battle. The raid continues with minor success, capturing rifles and escaping the capture of Mudwall Jackson, a real officer. So the Averill-Crook raid, how did it fare? Well, I haven't been entirely honest with you, dear viewer, because there is a third partner in this federal excursion, and Major General Franz Sigel is still on the move. The 11th, we turn again to Louisiana, not for the Red River, but for their constitutional convention. In New Orleans, they adopted an ordinance of emancipation without compensation. Oh, and last week in Annapolis, Maryland, a constitutional convention started. I cut it from last week's report because it needed to be shorter, unlike this brisk and easy week. For the final action of this week, General William Tecumseh Sherman's campaign. The task before him is challenging. The Army of Tennessee has occupied Rocky Face Ridge under Rebel General Joseph E. Johnston. Sherman knows this, but hopes that the important Tunnel Hill can be taken. He sends out a topographical team who find Sherman his four-leaf clover. With only 100 Confederate cavalry to guard it, the tunnel of Tunnel Hill is undamaged. The task force taken is given to Brigadier General Jefferson Davis, no relation to the rebel president. The 52nd Ohio goes in against the secessionists. The skirmishers struck the enemy vedettes at a distance of 2 miles from Ringgold. The desultory firing was kept up within a mile of Tunnel Hill, and a brisk skirmish took place, the enemy's force consisting of 50 to 100 cavalry or mounted infantry. General Wheeler, who defended the hill, was forced back. Southwest of this, the Army of the Tennessee, under Major General McPherson, reached its objectives, pushing back the rebel pickets. Despite all this success, Johnston is not impressed. Its progress was so slow that the Confederates were not driven from Tunnel Hill until 11 o'clock a.m., or to Mill Creek Gap until 3 p.m. Man, I thought I was cool using military time. Well, anyway, by nighttime on the 7th, the Union has the 4th, 14th, and 23rd Corps front of Rocky Face Ridge. The next several days, Major General Thomas and Major General Schofield probe the enemy line looking for a weakness. They find none. Furthermore, it just goes to show the enlisted man how hard a fight it will be. Down the chain of command it goes till caught by Brigadier General Harker, who is forced to take his brigade forward. Then the order goes to one of Harker's regiments, Colonel Emerson Opdyke's 125th Ohio, to move on the summit. The ridge is 500 or 600 feet high, and the crest so narrow as to render it impossible for more than 4 men to march abreast upon it. We had a plain view of the enemy's works and batteries and could see Dalton. The importance of it as a point of observation was apparent. Harker's brigade marches a mere 3/4 of a mile by nightfall, but are reinforced with a cannon overnight. A single cannon. The morning of the 9th sees battle once more. The whole extent of the ridge occupied by us amounted to about 1 3/4 miles. As each enemy position was crossed, Confederate troops fell back to another, more secure line. Near the center of the battle, 3 Federal divisions strike General Hardee's line, pushing it back, but unable to advance any great distance. For the rebel artillery overlooked flooded roads, a perfect killing zone. When the 31st Illinois were sent forward, they were swallowed by the water. Moving even further south, rebel cavalry scouts out the Union line, uncovering McPherson's army. This cavalry is too tiny to stand up against the Union, so the call goes out to reinforce Doug Gap. So an entire cavalry brigade joins the scouts. Through gunfire and rolling down boulders, I'm not joking, they hold off Hooker's corps. As soon as Doug Gap is secured, the order comes to move to right towards Snake Creek Gap. The Union is pushing everywhere, exhausting their gray opponents. As night falls on the 8th, Johnston is thrilled. His troops might be tired, but they have held against superior numbers, being only slightly pushed back. His cavalry commander Wheeler suggests a ride around Sherman, just as Stuart had done to McClellan. This is rejected. Push to the rear of Tunnel Hill. The army of the enemy is west and on the Rocky Face, or to the north. Sherman has been able to keep his enemy somewhat in the dark. At 0500 hours on the 9th, McPherson takes his 24,000 men and strikes from Snake Creek Gap. The 9th Mounted Illinois comes across the brigade of Colonel Grigsby. The Gray Riders, which the 9th takes entirely by surprise, chasing them as they flee to Racicot. His subordinates later chastised Johnston for caring more about the enemy in his front than the possibility of one in his rear, but to his defense, Brigadier General James Cantey's fresh brigade, sent to Racicot from Rome, defended Racicot. McPherson reports to Sherman the events and his confusion about rebel infantry in Racicot, but promises to figure it out soon. The 9th Illinois advances, and it turns out there is a considerable infantry force there. The 16th Corps under Major General Greenville Dodge is to develop the enemy. The 2nd Division under General Thomas Sweeney pushes Cantey's 37th Mississippi back and takes Bald Hill. McPherson writes to Dodge and asks him to approach a nearby railroad of Dalton Road. The 9th Illinois again rides, cutting telegraph wires, but chased off from the railroad by rebel patrols. At 1600 hours, Dodge gets direct orders to take Racicot and the railroads. The concerto of Sherman's plan. Brigadier General John Fuller is the first to cross Camp Creek. They reach the railroad and are ordered to fall back by McPherson. McPherson believes could not succeed in cutting the railroad before dark, displayed considerable force, and opened on us with artillery. They didn't show considerable force. He became anxious about his position despite only losing 6 KIA and 30 WIA. He was scared out of his mind. Despite mucking up the entire plan, Sherman doesn't seem angry, calmly informing General Halleck, "We will have to fight it out." The rebels have no idea what is going on. I am unable to decide what the Yankees are endeavoring to accomplish. There seems to be no force threatening us except on Rocky Face, and that force has been unusually quiet today. When Johnston is informed of the skirmish by Canty, he orders a withdrawal to Resaca until he is told of the Union falling back. In the end, the rebels do fall back to Resaca, as it becomes clear that this is Sherman's next target. The Union is also able to take Dalton. The railroad is entirely uninjured up to this point. I will make it a depot at once. The walls of Troy have fallen. The Union supply line is secure. 200 dead, 637 wounded. Compared to battles before, pretty bloodless. But the path before Sherman is not an easy one. Next week, he will have to assault Resaca. Then there is Sickles, and he is meeting with the main story. Having left Nashville in the company of Governor Andrew Johnson, he has now moved to Georgia to meet with General William Tecumseh Sherman. You can visit any and all points within this command. Give Sickles such information as he may require in the execution of his office. Sickles is again in the saddle before an army. He rides to his old friend Major General Joseph Hooker. With reporter Thomas Crook by his side, Sherman fully compliant in the company of a good companion Hooker, Hooker is at home, where he belongs, the front lines. That's where the week ends, and I want to look at the Army of Northern Virginia. It is so very different than the one that started the war. The formation started as the Army of the Potomac, but switched its name. The force took form under Old Robert, with his triumvirate below him, Lieutenant General Thomas Stonewall Jackson, the hero of Bull Run, the savior of the Shenandoah. Lost at Chancellorsville. There is Lieutenant General James Longstreet, Lee's right hand, Rock of Fredericksburg, wounded at the Wilderness. Major General JEB Stuart, dies of the rebellion, rode around McClellan, lost at Yellow Tavern. 2/3 of the command are dead, and Longstreet might be joining his comrades soon. General Lee needs strong subordinates. The question must be, can the triumvirate be replaced? And the answer is no. Can he continue without them? Hello, it's the entire Civil War Week by Week team here. I'd just like to thank anyone who has reached this point. I know this week was a long one, and I really do appreciate every single one of you guys who watch what I do in my very small dorm room in my free time. Thank you. I hope to see you next week.